fun fact. Yes, I do have a fun fact. I needed to have a fun fact for this episode, because I'll get to that in a second. But the fun fact: did you know the Citroen Xantia Activa V6 holds the record for the moose test at 85 kilometers an hour, I think it is. If you're not aware what the moose test is a test they do to see the high speed maneuverability of a car in case you needed to avoid something like a moose in the road. Hence the name, the moose test. There you go. Fun fact for you. How are we all getting on? Good. I was going to bring this podcast from a stroll down Sandy Mount Beach because the tide was very, very, very far out. But the sea breeze, which was admittedly very, very pleasant, was a bit too strong, and I think it would have interrupted the audible experience. So now I've decided to just lie in a park because it is a fucking unbelievable day. There's been a few unbelievable days now in the last couple, and this is no exception, and long may it last, because by God do I love sunny weather. Cold has its time and place, quite literally, but if I had fuck you money after I bought a silly amount of cars, I would probably spend my days chasing the sun. Speaking of sun, actually, it would probably be a wise time to have a convertible car, although, as I was discussing with some friends earlier, I'm not against convertibles, not in the slightest, but I just don't know if I'd necessarily ever own one. But we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that later. So the 10th episode of the podcast. Who'd have thought it? We'd get this far. Thank you for everyone who's made it to this point. If you're listening to this now, well, fair play to you. So 10 episodes in. So I thought, this being a landmark double-digit episode, I think it was time to take some time for me. I'm going to talk about myself because narcissism. That's the modern way. It's all about the individual. But no. Also, what I wanted to talk about was how, because I'd love to know how other people have, but I just wanted to explain. Well, I don't really have an answer, but how I became a car person, weirdo, whatever way you want to phrase it. Because I'm not 100% sure I have an answer. Probably my earliest memory of automotive pleasure, which sounds like an innuendo, either like about three or four, because I was in a big boy bed for sure, and on said bed I had on the it's not the headboard, I suppose what you call the footboard, the end of the bed, that's not the bit where you put your head. I had a steering wheel, dashboard, gear stick, kids attachment thing, and I can still remember the joy of just operating a steering wheel and a gear stick, the movement of the mechanical pieces. I don't know, something about it seemed to have set a spark under me, and that just continued that way. And the weird thing is that, like, my father didn't particularly care for the motor car. He had some, obviously, but to say he had any sort of passion or saw as any kind of hobby, not at all. Nor my older brother or my sister. My childhood mates, some of them had, a mild interest in cars, as much as I think all young guys and some girls do. But I don't think any of them would have grown up to what you would call a car enthusiast, or again, a car weirdo, as we were probably called. And obviously in later life, I've met plenty of people, just as as we walk through the journey of life, the people we meet. So I've plenty of car buddies now, just from life experience, and obviously I've become, being old enough to own and drive my own cars and dive deeper into the communities. It's obviously easier to meet people of similar interest. But yeah, it's a strange one, and obviously I've gone through peaks and troughs in my life. Later teens, early 20s, when all you are thinking about is getting drunk and having sex, basically. I probably wasn't as active as I normally was, but it was always there. There was never a point where I wasn't buying car magazines or well, I don't know how much car video there was back in those days. YouTube would have been in its early infancy, so I probably did a bit. But then the older I get, the more I seem to want to embrace my love and devotion for the automobile, which I suppose is the same with most people in hobbies, as we chase that inner child within us, to hark back to the things we loved as kids. But I suppose it's a strange hobby, isn't it? Because you can't really embrace it fully up until you get to about the age of 16 for most of us anyway. Some, you live in rural parts, you probably end up getting thrown behind the wheel of stuff at an early age. And some people, if they grow up with other car people in the family, they probably end up learning how to do J turns and Scandinavian flicks from before they're in big boy pants. But so you get this like kind of first half, well, depending on what part of your life you're in, but the first decade and a half or so, literally just watching from afar, reading the magazines, looking at them on the street, but you can't actually own or drive one. And then you get to the next segment where you can buy your own car, all the pleasures that driving gives you, and ownership. The ownership can be both pleasure and a chore, but that's all part of the fun. And then it's all about ridiculous decisions can you make from there on in. How much money are you time are you willing to sacrifice on what is essentially an inanimate object? Well, it's not inanimate because it does move. It's not a living thing, basically. Let's put it that way. It's a good, to most people, the car is a white good, unless you're like myself, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are at least of a somewhat similar vein. But yeah, as I say, like I have plenty of car mates now, and it's obviously stuff like being a millennial, as I'm sure some of you are too. We all remember the world before the internet, and we're obviously now living through the internet age. It certainly isn't going to go anywhere. But obviously, the internet opens up so many doors to, strengthening the love and passion of cars, because there's just so much information out there. That's the thing about the car as well, is like there's so much history. There's always something going on in modern day, and obviously we're living through one of the strangest transitions that the history of the motor car has ever seen. So there's always something, be it old, new, strange, quirky, bold, brash. It's an organic, for want of a better word, it's a living, breathing passion that changes and evolves, and yet has this rich history that actually doesn't go back that far. Like obviously if you're into like music or fine art, the history goes back even further, but we've a good solid century of stuff to look back on. And and it's just because you all well know, if you're listening to my podcast, it really does, it's all encompassing for me essentially. Not 365 days a year, but a lot of the time I go to bed thinking about cars and I wake up again. As weird as that sentence is, you just gotta be honest with yourself sometimes, and my God, it brings me a lot of pleasure. But anyway, so yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there, and I would love to hear other people's stories. I'm sure plenty of you were lucky enough, unlike me, to have maybe family or friends that were there from when you have any tangible memories guided you through your life of being a car enthusiast. But as I said, to me, it was some sort of strange, self-inflicted passion from an early age that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But that's enough talking about me, I think. I just thought I'd kick it off, episode 10 with something a bit different. I suppose I'll get into the car news. There hasn't been a whole lot going on, but I have a few things jotted down here. One thing that stood out there is this thing called the Eversti, I think it is EVE or STI, I think it's Eversti Signature. So it's a 964 resto mod kind of thing, which is obviously nothing new. A wide-bodied setup, you know what I'm going for. It's got whale tail, it's got the wide body, and it's an aggressive-looking resto mod 964. It's an EV, 500 horsepower, etc., etc. Not particularly amazing range. I think it's something like 150 miles or something like that. But anyway, I've made a tradition of starting off with EV news, mostly because I wanted to, the electric vehicle is certainly of the zeitgeist at the moment. Whether it's actually the way things go long term, that's another thing. But and as I said, like I do it because I wanted to wanted to show that I'm not against the electric vehicle at all, and that's why I've kind of kept a tradition of leading with electric vehicle news on this podcast. But sacrificing a 964 and turning it into an EV, I think, is a bit shit, because while the flat six of a 911 is a huge part of the appeal, it's such a unique, almost, it's not completely unique, but very much a Porsche thing. It's part of the identity of the 911. Yeah, making an electric resto mod Porsche seems a little bit sacrilegious to me. But the one thing that really annoyed me about this Eversti Signature thing is in the pictures I saw online of it, for some reason they've kept, well, they would not even kept, they would have had to make and apply, because it's got in-house built bodywork, etc. But for some reason they've kept the exhaust tips. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking about that because it kind of annoyed me when I saw it. But there you go. The Volkswagen RTN Or, the UK prices were announced. With UK prices, and this is the base price, 51,000. Over here, I think you're looking at a base price for an RTN Or of what, 70 grand? And no doubt you're going to want some extras. So what are you talking about? Probably an 80 grand car. Again, like obviously no one's going to pay sticker price, but I like the RTN. I think some people don't like it, but I think I like it. And I like the quote unquote shooting brake version that they've brought out, which isn't a shooting brake because you have to have two doors to be shooting brake. But yeah, that's an expensive car, and I can't, well, maybe they will sell those because like how much is a Cooper Formentor? That must be a 50, 60 grand car over here, if not more. And in the last couple of days, I've seen more than 2 Cooper Formentors. So yeah, maybe the RTN Or will sell, but it's not a crossover. So is there a market out there? Some people going by in a Mini Cooper convertible with the roof down, which is good to see because I've seen it's been about a 50-50 split, I'll say. Most people have, 50% of people have had their roof down. Actually, some guy went by in a current gen C63 AMG convertible on UK plates, a white one, with the roof down, which was nice because it sounded great. But yeah, we'll get back to the convertible talking about. Yeah, not being an SUV, the RTN Or might be a hard sell. McLaren have decided, I was talking about the roofless, weird, low volume sports car things that all these manufacturers are bringing out, and the McLaren Elva wasn't selling very well in the US market because you had to get some sort of special dispensation to be able to road register it in the US because it hasn't got a windscreen. So McLaren have decided to now offer it with a windscreen, which completely defeats the purpose of what it was intentionally, but I suppose it looks terrible actually with the windscreen. It doesn't suit it because it's clearly an afterthought. But yeah, so like there's a car that nobody needs made crapper by making it more practical. Oh, did anyone see this this Rolls-Royce boat tail, which they're making 3 of? It's based on which one's the drop top Rolls? I don't know, whichever the drop top one is. Ghost, right? No, the Ghost is the small one. Wraith is the 2-door. Whatever the drop top version of the current Rolls-Royce lineage is. I'm pulling a blank on that one, but anyway, it's based on that, but it has this like much more swept tail on it to kind of mimic a luxury speedboat yacht, and it's got lots of strange accoutrement in it, like a champagne cooler and blah 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 and yada yada yada. It's basically they're building 3 of them for some loyal Rolls-Royce customers, but they're also using it as a kind of a launch point for their new but an old idea section called Rolls-Royce Coach Build. So obviously back in the day, Rolls-Royce would allow you to employ a coach builder and or designer to design you your own personalized body that they would just put on a Rolls-Royce chassis. So the world of bespoke cars is it's a profitable industry to be in, as I think a lot of people have kind of shown in the last few years. So yeah, Rolls-Royce are getting on board with that. It's definitely a Marmite car. I think it's kind of cool in isolation. I can't see what it would really be for. But the article I was reading, and I'll have to possibly fact check this because apparently the 3 of them are going to cost £20 million. Let's let that sink in there for a second. 20 million. So I'm just going to leave that with you, and I'm going to move on to some more interesting news. Is the two kind of anniversaries. The Countach is 50, which is almost crazy to say out loud. Not that I was alive when it was first launched, but to be a 50-year-old car, I suppose just to me it's always like a 35-year-old car because I'm still stuck in my youth. But I read an article that I think it must belong to the Lamborghini Museum, but a beautiful green, very early Periscopo Countach, which just looked absolutely amazing. But yeah, 50 years old, and whether it's the best car to own and drive of the late 70s, early 80s supercars, probably not, but you can't deny it's a cool car. It looks great. It's loud and flashy and, cannonball run. And then another anniversary, and there was an accompanying video on their official YouTube page, Porsche completely restored Walter Rolls 924 GTS rally car, and there's a lovely video of the finished article. It's gold, and it's amazing. It's got big, massive rally headlights on it and spotlights. And then Walter Roll is there as well, explaining how much he loves the car and how much he loves the restoration work that's been done on it. I think he owns it now as well. I think they actually gave it to him. I'd have to double check that again. Don't quote me on that. It might be in the Porsche Museum, but that's a good video to watch. I'd recommend that. I think there's any other stuff I could recommend, video wise or podcast wise. As well as like Harry Metcalf's most recent video of he brings a McLaren SLR on a little 3-day drive weekend away with his wife down to the Lake Districts. But it's a McLaren SLR by MSO, McLaren Special Operations, which actually works out of the very original McLaren building before they moved into the MTC Technology Centre thing. But yeah, so they've tweaked pretty much everything about the car, both inside and out. I won't go into too many details, let you watch it. But one thing they do offer, and it's actually the most expensive of the list of things they can offer people who own a McLaren Mercedes SLR, is it's a different colour. It's kind of a aquamarine-y, bluey kind of colour, dark aquamarine, turquoisey green colour. I'm a bit colourblind, so don't quote me on the exact colour, but it looks fantastic in the paint colour, this new colour. It kind of adds something to the bottom sill because it kind of cuts in, and anyway, I'll let you watch it. But the paint job is 56 grand, which is the most expensive one of all the things they do, because they do everything to things like exhaust, engine management, braking, gearbox, interior, blah blah. But anyway, that's worth a watch. Just to put that one out to you there. Oh yeah, so what I was going to talk about with convertibles, that's all the car news, by the way. There hasn't been a whole lot going on. Jesus, I thought a bird shit me there. It was just something fell out of a tree. Just convertibles. So I was having this discussion with some friends earlier this morning, actually, about convertible cars. One of my friends actually sent, he saw an OR129 on some mono blocks, and it was a 500. Actually, before I get into this convertible conversation, just before I came to, trying to find a place to actually sit and record this podcast where I didn't look like an absolute freak, I saw a Jensen Interceptor, but no ordinary Jensen Interceptor. It was an FF. I've seen some other interesting cars today as well, which I'll probably put up on the gram. I can't think off the top of my head. But anyway, so the convertible conversation. We were thinking, I was like, he saw that OR129 and he was like, this is probably one of the few convertible cars I would choose to own. And I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good shout. The OR129 is a cool car. His dad actually used to own one. He just sold it. It was a late 320 in red. Terrible. But yeah. So like we were going into the conversation of what are acceptable convertibles, and as I said, like I'm not against convertibles in any way, and there's some I actually quite enjoy. But I was trying to think, is there a convertible that you would buy where there is a hard top variant, or it was a hard top initially and then they cut the roof off? I know some people will always go for the convertible option, as is shown by the amount of convertibles you see in Ireland, even though we really don't have the climate for them. But personally, I always feel I'd go for the hard top of something over the convertible version. If I'm going to get a convertible, I'd rather get a convertible that was a convertible from the get-go, i.e., MX-5, etc. But yeah, I'm not sure. We haven't come to any particular conclusion as to what car you would absolutely buy in convertible form that actually originally came as a hard top. The only one I could think of off the top of my head was the Citroën DS Decompatible, which is a great word because it just reminds me of decapitation, losing your head and all that. When I say the word, but obviously the decompatibles are much rarer than the saloons, and they're also ridiculously more expensive. But that's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. But also, like the DS, you're not buying that for dynamics, so chopping the roof off isn't, I don't think, going to make that big of a difference as to how the thing drives. But I don't think there's any car that you would buy as a driver's car. Maybe we should add that criteria. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. But that's the only one I can think of. But then, if anyone can think of a convertible car that you buy as a toy, what your driving needs are is completely up to you. But a car that you would buy that is a convertible, but it comes as a fixed roof initially, So yeah, let me know what you think. I think I'll wrap it up there. I'm sure there's other things I'm supposed to talk about, but I've been sitting in the sun now for a few minutes and I can actually feel myself baking. Even though I do have some protection on, I always wear some protection. It's very, very warm and sunny today, which is brilliant. I say, long may it last. But yeah, I'll sign off there now for episode 10. It's great to get to such a beautifully large numbered milestone. Large, everything being relative. I'll talk to you again probably during the week. And until then, be safe, be well. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.